NFC West is a complete mess. Hello, everybody. Welcome to NFL Picks and Predictions Week 9. So, we definitely saw some interesting games last week. For one thing, we saw that the Rams still have some life when they have their top two receivers. I definitely lost off of Minnesota that game. Cleveland, how did they knock off Baltimore? That was incredible. I'm so mad I did not bet on Cleveland. Detroit, blowing up the scoreboard once again. Arizona, sneaking up once again on Miami. It is crazy, man. The Patriots actually winning. How about the Commanders, right? I did go for Chicago in the last video. I was wrong. Think about the turnout and how close it was. I got a comment in the last video that said, "This goofy picked Chicago. He is lucky if Chicago doesn't get blown out. He better own up to his lapse in judgment." Okay, first of all, if I do have a lapse in judgment, I do own up to it. I do eat my words, or if you follow me on Instagram, which I will include my username in the description, it is at IHateEverything200. I will do live videos after every NFL week. And sometimes I will post in my stories how I will admit if I am wrong. But instead of eating my words, I tend to drink them, like with beer. And second of all, Chicago did not get blown out. In fact, Chicago was leading most of the game. They would have actually won if it was not for that Hail Mary that Jaden Daniels threw at the end of the game. But also, that was partially some poor judgment on my behalf because I was kind of on the fence. I felt if Jaden Daniels was playing, Washington had a better chance, but I had to choose someone no matter what, no matter who their starting quarterback would be. I did think Washington had a fair chance if Jaden Daniels was playing. Sure enough, he was playing, but I still came very close to being correct, so it's not all out on me. So if you're watching this video, you can't get too upset with me. But with that being said, enough about the previous games. Let's move on to Week 9. So let's start with Thursday night's game, which is Houston Texans and New York Jets. So this could definitely be a fun game to watch. The reason the odds are so close is because Stephon Diggs got hurt pretty bad in last week's game against Indianapolis, and it looks like, unfortunately, Stephon Diggs will be out for the rest of the season. The New York Jets are a very slight favorite to win the game. Point spread for New York Jets is -2. As far as it goes for betting on this game, it could easily go either way. I know it's expected to be close. At the end of the day, I still feel like the Jets will play like the Jets, and even without Stephon Diggs, I feel like Houston's getting a good break this week. I think they can still pull it off. Maybe it'll be close, could easily be a one-score game. I feel like the Jets will keep playing like they are, and for them to lose to the Patriots last week, that ought to tell you that it's not going to be easy at all for them to beat Houston, because even without Stephon Diggs, Houston is still a much better team than New England. So at the end of the day, it could be a one-score game, but I'm going with Houston on this one. I think they can pull it off and increase their chances of winning the AFC South, which after they beat Indianapolis on Sunday, which it did come close. I know I did think Indianapolis would win. Indianapolis needed that game a lot more than Houston, so the fact that they've lost the AFC South is now Houston's to lose, and I think their chances of winning that division are pretty good. And in the least, they've got a spot in the playoffs. It will definitely be tougher without Diggs, and the least they could tell everyone, hey, we made it to the playoffs, and hey, we won AFC South for the second year in a row. I know CJ Stroud can pull it off, and he will definitely try. I feel Houston's being overestimated this season. It's really not their fault if they're down one of their best players, but I think they're good enough to get to the playoffs at this point. I know that I've said multiple times that I feel Houston is being overestimated this season, but I'm still confident enough to say, even with them being a slight underdog, they are good enough to still beat the Jets. So, moving on to Sunday's games, we've got Miami Dolphins and Buffalo Bills. So we've got this division rivalry here, and it looks like Tua is back, but he still lost by 1 point to Arizona. That's at least the second time Arizona has sneaked up on a team and won by 1 point. They did the same thing to San Francisco, and I'm so mad at myself for not placing a live bet on Arizona when they were behind Miami. I would have had crazy underdog odds, but can't complain about that. We have to move on. As far as it goes for this game, I feel if Miami struggles with Arizona, even with Tua, they're going to struggle once again with Buffalo. In fact, I think they will be having a harder time beating Buffalo than in week 2, because Buffalo played them and blew them out. And I feel this game, it may or may not be a blowout, but Buffalo is sort of coming back. They will be starting slow, so maybe within the first half it'll be close. But then I think, based on what Buffalo was able to do the last couple of weeks with Tennessee and Seattle, they started out close. It looked like in the first half, ooh, it could go either way. But then second half, bam, Buffalo starts blowing up the scoreboard. And I feel like they could very well pull it off for this game. According to the betting odds on ESPN, and this is being recorded on Tuesday, so the betting odds might slightly fluctuate within the next couple of days, and there also could be someone who gets hurt in practice that I didn't know about. Just as a quick disclaimer, but based on what we know now, it looks like Miami and Buffalo will have both their starting quarterbacks. Buffalo does have a good chance of covering the spread. I think they can win by at least a touchdown, so going point spread may not be a bad bet, but at most I do a medium number of chips on that. Not a high number of chips, because you don't know what Miami could pull off. Buffalo could still win by a field goal, or Miami could pull off some kind of upset. I just don't see it in them this week. I think, no matter what the end score is, Buffalo is going to win the game on Sunday and improve their record for the season. They've done everything but won the AFC East at this point, because Miami, New England, and New York, they've only won like 2 games each this season. It's done for the rest of them. Buffalo can afford to take a loss here and there, so at this point it's not so much is Buffalo trying to win the division and go into the playoffs, it's how close to the top seed can we get, which I'll get more into that later, and possibly make a separate video based off of playoff predictions at this point in the season. So moving on, we've got Denver Broncos and Baltimore Ravens. This game currently has Baltimore as a very good favorite. Point spread for them is -9.5. So they could easily blow up the scoreboard, win by double digits. I could see it happening. However, I really overestimated Baltimore last week. I thought they had it, and then they lose to Cleveland. Now, that could partially have to do with Jameis Winston. I don't know if that's how you say his name. It could have the same effect that Carolina had with Andy Dalton in Week 3 when he played Las Vegas and gave Carolina their only win of the season so far. Sometimes when that team gets that new quarterback, they can come out with plays the other team's not quite ready for. And I feel like when Cleveland tried out Winston, he kind of gave Baltimore a surprise. But now Baltimore's more ready, and I think the other teams that are playing Cleveland are a little bit more ready. Because if you notice with Carolina, Andy Dalton came out with that huge win, and although the next couple of weeks I did think that Carolina would win those games with Andy Dalton, they still lost. Denver is definitely having a good season. For them to be 5-3, I don't think many people expected it at this point. So they've definitely been that team a lot of people, including myself, underestimated that has really come from behind. And this game could definitely be competitive. Bo Nix could give Lamar Jackson some competition. So going point spread for either teams is not necessarily a horrible bet. There would be arguments for or against betting on either point spread. Now, I think at the end of the day, Baltimore could maybe slow down in the fourth quarter, and Denver could catch up. But I think at the end of the day, Baltimore kind of knows where they messed up last week. They'll get their act together. They'll come back. They'll play stronger. And even if it's a close game. Either way, I think Baltimore is going to win the game on Sunday and improve their record to 6-3 for the season, which I do think the AFC North is a toss-up between Baltimore and Pittsburgh, because it's all over for Cleveland and Cincinnati. So those two teams are really working at it. I feel like Baltimore does have an advantage over Pittsburgh just because of the fact that Pittsburgh has struggled against some of the teams that aren't seen as real great. But I know Baltimore has lost a couple of games to teams that were seen as pretty bad. So it's kind of interesting how that works. Baltimore seems to be able to knock off the other good teams. And when they lose, it's to someone who's not that good or who loses most of the time. Don't understand how that works, but Denver's a better team, so probably Baltimore will be playing better. Moving on to the next game, we've got Los Angeles Chargers and Cleveland Browns. So Los Angeles is a very slight favorite. Point spread for them is -1.5. Now, Los Angeles pulled off a pretty big win last week, and they did a pretty good job against New Orleans, but New Orleans is having a lot of problems, and after starting the season great the first 2 weeks, they've just been falling ever since. And they will possibly get their act together later in the season, but at this point, I feel like it's just about done for them. But as far as it goes with Cleveland, I imagine that the betting odds are close for this game because Jameis Winston had that surprise victory against Baltimore. And I understand, you should be praising them. It looks like he will be their starting quarterback for the remainder of the season. As far as it goes for this game, I imagine Cleveland having home field advantage might play a part in their betting odds being very close. I somewhat feel like Jameis Winston will have the same effect on Cleveland that Andy Dalton had on Carolina. He'll have a great performance. The win Cleveland got against Baltimore is a lot harder than the win Carolina got against Las Vegas. I get it. And I imagine Jameis Winston will be playing better overall than Andy Dalton the rest of the season. And that's assuming Andy Dalton was not in an accident, if Andy Dalton was still playing like he has been. So Cleveland does have a fighting chance with Jameis Winston, don't get me wrong. And the Los Angeles Chargers, they could play as good as they did against New Orleans last week, or they could be having an early lead, but then I noticed that the Chargers tend to struggle within the fourth quarter, and that could very well happen this game. But if I had to guess, I feel like it's a toss-up. I'm still saying that Cleveland will be struggling with Jameis Winston, that he may not be as hot as people are thinking, but we will know more after this week. But I have to choose someone who I think is going to get the win, and I'm going to have to go with Los Angeles on this one. I think it could be a close game, probably a one-score game, so going point spread or money line on Los Angeles, not a bad bet. I mean, if you want to bet that on Cleveland, you think Cleveland wins, bet money line on Cleveland. If I had to go for one, I'd say Los Angeles gets the W, and it will definitely help with their playoff chances, at least being a wild card. In fact, that's all they can be, because we already know who's going to win the AFC West, right? If Los Angeles wins the game on Sunday, their chances of going to the playoffs are definitely going up, and they are definitely in a more comfortable position going forward. So then we've got New Orleans Saints and Carolina Panthers. This is going to be a division rivalry game that people are just going to see who is not the worst team right now. That's really what this is about. This game's a race for the bottom. For that, I wouldn't bet a lot on it. But New Orleans is a comfortable favorite. Point spread for them is -7. And based on how much Carolina's been struggling, unfortunately, I feel really bad for Andy Dalton. I hope he recovers. Hope he at least feels good enough to play. But if Bryce Young is their starting quarterback, Carolina knows they made a mistake getting Bryce Young as their starting quarterback. But that's all they've got. I'm sure that they will try, but overall, it looks like a lot of the Saints players that have been out with injuries are going to be back. Looks like Derek Carr could very well be back. Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill. With all them back together, New Orleans will have a pretty easy time holding off Carolina. So I'm going with New Orleans on this game. I feel like on Sunday, New Orleans will finally break their 6-game losing streak. So then we've got Las Vegas Raiders and Cincinnati Bengals. So, according to the odds, Cincinnati is a pretty good favorite. Point spread for them is -7.5. And last week, Cincinnati was playing pretty good in the first half against Philadelphia, but then the second half, Philadelphia just trampled them. And I do not think that this game will necessarily be a repeat of that. But what I will say about the Raiders, even though they're dealing with their quarterback situation, they don't have Davante Adams anymore, they still kept it pretty competitive on that game last week against Kansas City. And I think they will make this game against Cincinnati more competitive. We've seen Cincinnati hasn't been as strong as Kansas City. Cincinnati is not going to be the team that we saw them as in the 2021 and 2022 seasons. And I think if Las Vegas can bring that competition to Cincinnati on Sunday, I think they can hold them off. I will go out of my way to say I feel like Las Vegas will pull off the upset on Sunday, but I'm going with Las Vegas on this one. Does it help their playoff chances? Not at all. The season for both these teams is over with. But in the least, the Raiders will show, hey, we're not the worst team in the NFL right now. And plus, with those underdog odds of plus 280, could get a pretty decent payout, but I would not bet a lot on this game. I would only bet a small number of chips if you were to go for Las Vegas, but I do think that they will pull off the win. So then we've got Washington Commanders and New York Giants. This will be a fun division rivalry, and the odds are actually pretty close. Washington is the favorite, and the point spread for them is only -3.5. So as I mentioned, I was wrong about guessing that Chicago would beat Washington last week. I did say it'd be close. Luckily, it was pretty close. I was right about that, and I would have actually been right about the end result if Jaden Daniels hadn't thrown that Hail Mary, but that was an incredible play, and Washington definitely deserved the win last week. As far as it goes for this game with the Giants, I'm kind of surprised the betting odds are this close. Now, the Giants do have home field advantage, and they still put on some competition against Pittsburgh on the Monday night game last week, so that could definitely play a part. And I do feel like the Giants' defense can maybe keep Washington from blowing up the scoreboard. I still think that the Giants will struggle offensively. I think Jaden Daniels can really help the offense score. Maybe they won't blow up the scoreboard like they have some previous weeks, but I think at the end of the day, Washington's going to take the win. I'm going with Washington on this one. I think Washington will improve their record to 7-2 on Sunday, and I still feel like they currently have the advantage to win NFC East. I feel like it's really between them and Philadelphia at this point, because Dallas is done for, New York's done for. It's ultimately between the two of them, so we'll know more Sunday based on who wins and who loses, because if Washington wins and Philadelphia loses, that definitely puts Washington in a pretty good spot to win the division. But if Washington loses, Philadelphia wins, the tables may turn. So we'll know more on Sunday, but I would still go with Washington at this point to win the AFC East. So then we've got Dallas Cowboys and Atlanta Falcons. Now for this game, Atlanta is a slight favorite. Point spread for them is -3. After seeing how well Atlanta has been playing with Kirk Cousins, I will admit, I will own up to the fact that I almost feel like I was wrong about Atlanta. I kind of put them in the same boat as the Jets, that, okay, doesn't matter if they have Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, doesn't matter if they're getting a new coach, the Jets are still going to play bad. So far, I've been right about that, but I have been wrong about Atlanta. Kirk Cousins has shown that he still has it, and he could actually help Atlanta win the NFC South for the first time in years. When Drew Brees was with the Saints, they were always winning the division. And then Tom Brady joined Tampa. Even without him, they still won the division last season, mostly just because the other teams were doing bad. But at this point, the NFC South is Atlanta's to lose. And I think if Kirk Cousins can just keep playing as good as he has been, it's theirs. They have that spot in the playoffs. As far as it goes with this game, Dallas has really shown that they're not playing great, but then there have been a couple of games where they start to catch up in the fourth quarter, but it's just not enough to take them over the top, and they still lose. As with the Sunday night game with San Francisco, Brock Purdy really stepped up. He was putting in more rush yards. He was helping them get more touchdowns. If some of the better players of San Francisco are out on IR, he is really keeping their chances of going to the playoffs alive. And at this point, the NFC West, I feel, is the most competitive division, so it is anybody's at this point. But I'll get more into that a little bit later in the video. As far as it goes for this game, I think Dallas could keep it close. They could keep it competitive. It could be a repeat of the last Sunday night game where they're behind and then they start to catch up in the fourth quarter. But we know that Kirk Cousins can show strength in the fourth quarter. So even if Dallas is ahead, I feel like Kirk Cousins could pull off one of those game-winning drives. There are multiple conclusions that I'm drawing from this game, but they all end with Atlanta winning the game. So I'm going with Atlanta on this one. I think they will improve their record to 6-3 and make their chances of winning NFC South even higher. And if Tampa loses and Atlanta wins, that will give Atlanta a commanding lead in the division. So then we've got New England Patriots and Tennessee Titans. Honestly, New England did kind of surprise me with the win. I did actually bet point spread on New England, so I did win some money, but I wish I bet money line on New England when they were behind the New York Jets. I would have won so much more money, but there's nothing we can do now. Let's just look at this game. Tennessee is a slight favorite to win. Point spread for them is -3.5. Tennessee was close to Detroit at the beginning of last week's game, but then Detroit just blew them out. I think the final score was like 52-14. It was crazy. Now, New England will not be anywhere near as competitive as Detroit has been lately. I know they pulled off the win last week, but who were they playing? The Jets. And I know the Patriots have been one of the worst teams this season, but for some reason, with or without Tom Brady, the Patriots still somehow usually manage to beat the Jets. I don't know how. That just seems to be the way it is. It tends to work like that in a lot of the division rivalries. As far as it goes with this game, Tennessee does have home field advantage, which maybe makes them a slight favorite. And at the end of the day, I feel like it could be a close game, but I do think New England's going to struggle. I don't think it's going to be a very high-scoring game. That's probably why the over is 37.5. Would it necessarily be a good bet to go over or under on this game? I would kind of go for the over, but that would be a very small bet because I usually don't bet on the over. I usually just go point spread or money line. But since point spread is -3.5 for Tennessee, I would not bet point spread on them because they could easily win by a field goal. I feel money line Tennessee would be a good bet. At most, just do a medium number of chips. Plus, games like these where it's two bad teams, it's a race for the bottom. I don't want to go too much on that game. But at the end of the day, I have to choose somebody. I'm going to have to go with Tennessee on this one. I don't think they're going to play great, but they'll play good enough to hold off the Patriots on Sunday. So moving on to the afternoon games, we've got Chicago Bears and Arizona Cardinals. The betting odds are super close. Arizona is a very small favorite. Point spread for them is -1. The deciding factor here is the fact that Arizona has home field advantage. As I was mentioning earlier, the NFC West right now is the most competitive division in the NFL. Because most divisions, we at least have an idea of who probably is going to win, who's in the best position. And even if there's no clear team that could win the division, it's usually just one other team that's competing with them for that top spot. At this point, it looks like all four teams actually have a chance to win the division for different reasons. Arizona, they've been sneaking up on teams. It's been close wins, but a win is still a win, and that's why they're at 4-4 right now. They may not have a great season, but they have shown that they're probably going to end up with a better record than a lot of people expected going into the season. As far as it goes with Chicago, they've still been playing better too. They haven't been a total joke. I know Caleb Williams is doing a pretty good job overall, and they still have a chance to be a wild card in the playoffs. It's possible. It's getting to be more of a long shot at this point, but there are still pathways every team in NFC North can advance to the playoffs. As far as it goes for this game, both teams have a very good chance at winning. That's why the odds are so close. Although Arizona did have that close win on Sunday, both teams were very competitive in the previous week. Even though Chicago lost, they kept it very competitive, almost won against Washington. And Arizona, they were behind most of the game, but sneaked up at the end. So if you wanted to bet on who will get more points in the fourth quarter, I feel like Arizona would be the one to bet on. I really feel like Chicago's season is far from over. I think they still have a fighting chance. This game could easily go either way, which is why I would not place a high number of chips on it. I would go as far to say not even to bet a medium number of chips on this game. It could be very competitive, and I've got to go with someone. I think Chicago was able to keep the game against Washington very competitive, even with Jaden Daniels, and I think they can do the same, and it'll probably be close, but I'm going with Chicago on this one. And I think Chicago will keep their chances alive at being a wild card spot in the playoffs, because I feel the NFC North is a competition between Detroit and Minnesota. And after seeing Detroit have that blowout win and Minnesota losing to who? The Los Angeles Rams, I feel like it's getting to where the NFC North is Detroit's to lose, but Minnesota's still got a very good chance at this point of being a wild card. So does Green Bay, assuming Jordan Love is okay. So, moving on, we've got Jacksonville Jaguars and Philadelphia Eagles. Currently, Philadelphia is a pretty good favorite. Point spread for them is -7.5. Philadelphia pulled off a pretty good win against Cincinnati last week, I will admit to that. And this week, I feel like it won't be a lot different. I feel like Jacksonville might be even less competitive than Cincinnati, or they may not. Jacksonville definitely gave Green Bay some competition. I know Green Bay had their backup quarterback, so that definitely opened a window for Jacksonville to get the win, but Green Bay still had that game-winning field goal at the end and was able to hold them off. This week, I feel like Jacksonville will have more of a challenge, because if Jalen Hurts is playing with Philadelphia, I do not think Philadelphia will quite be as good as what people were expecting, but they did start off slow, and they are starting to improve their game. Maybe not like exponentially, or maybe not like real fast, but it's slowly but surely with them. I would almost guarantee them a wild card spot in the playoffs at this point. And with this game, I feel like they will have a pretty easy time holding off Jacksonville. Granted, there's been teams that Philadelphia has struggled with, like Cleveland, that they barely beat. So this could easily be a one-score game, which is why I probably will not bet point spread on Philadelphia, just because it's -7.5. But I would be comfortable doing a medium bet on Philadelphia for money line. But at the end of the day, I'm easily going with Philadelphia on this one. I think they'll improve their record to 6-2 and keep the NFC East very competitive with Washington. And while I do think Washington is in the best position to win NFC East, Philadelphia is definitely going to make them work for it. So then we've got Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers. This is a division rivalry I'm looking so forward to. I'm hoping Jordan Love feels good enough to play. If he's not playing, there's a very good chance Detroit will easily hold him off and blow up the scoreboard and possibly have a blowout against Green Bay like they did Dallas and Tennessee. If Jordan Love is playing, it could definitely be more competitive. Detroit is the favorite. Point spread for them is -3.5. And back when Aaron Rodgers played with Green Bay and Detroit was seen as like the worst team in the NFC North, Green Bay would always just go bam, bam, bam against Detroit. It was done. Now, I wouldn't quite say that the teams have gone opposite, but Detroit did go from being a joke team, usually coming in last for the NFC North, to now being the one that's expected to be first in the NFC North. I'm not going into this in detail right now, but I feel like at this point, if Detroit pulls off the win on Sunday, they will be in the best position, in my opinion, to actually be not just the winner of NFC North, but to be top seed in the NFC. We're not talking too much about that right now, but that's how I feel, and we will know more after Sunday. As far as it goes with this game, Detroit is a favorite to win by -3.5. Since I do not like taking point spread when it is -3.5, I feel like with or without Jordan Love, Detroit's got them at this point. And I think Green Bay, they'll put up a fight. But Detroit has been playing really good at this point. And with how great their offense has been, I would go as far to say that I would be comfortable actually betting point spread on Detroit. I think they can win by a lot more than a field goal. I don't think it'll be a blowout win, but I think they will win by a comfortable margin. So regardless, I'm going with Detroit on this one. I think they've got this, and that they will increase their chances of winning NFC North even more on Sunday. So then we've got Los Angeles Rams and Seattle Seahawks. This is a division rivalry, once again, that I will love to watch because, as I've mentioned, the NFC West is super competitive right now. You've seen me previous weeks, even in last week's video, when I was wrong about Los Angeles beating Minnesota. I thought Los Angeles was done for, but they have their star wide receivers back. It could have just been a surprise to Minnesota. Maybe Minnesota wasn't quite ready for Los Angeles to play the way they did. So I feel like Seattle will be a little bit more prepared for them. Can Los Angeles build up a winning streak and keep their playoff chances alive? Maybe. If they win this game, there's definitely a fighting chance because of how close the NFC West is. And Los Angeles is actually a slight favorite to win. Point spread for them is -1.5. Now, Seattle, they had a pretty bad loss to Buffalo. It was competitive at first, but then second half, Buffalo just blew them out. Is that going to happen this game? It could go either way. It is expected to be close. Even if Los Angeles has all of their best players, I still think it'll be a little bit harder for them this week. Just because I think Seattle's all ready for them. And Seattle does have home field advantage. So it could go either way, which is why I wouldn't put a lot of chips on this game. But I'm going to have to go with Seattle on this one. I think they've got it. I think they can pull it off. They'll be able to snap their losing streak on Sunday. And I think they'll be able to improve their record to 5-4 on Sunday. And possibly take first place in NFC West. Which, this game is definitely very important for both teams. Because Seattle wins, they go to 5-4. Los Angeles goes to 3-5. They're jumping down here. San Francisco's still at 4-4 because they've got their bye week. And then Arizona, depending on how their game goes against Chicago, that'll tell a lot. But if Seattle wins and Arizona loses, they're in much better shape going forward to win the NFC West. But that doesn't necessarily give them a commanding lead. It just means they're ahead for the time being. But that division is very close. Now, I feel like Los Angeles needs this game a little bit more than Seattle because Los Angeles wins, they'll go to 4-4. Seattle will drop to 4-5. They'll either be tied or one behind Arizona, depending on how the game goes for them. And then they'll be tied with San Francisco, which means that their playoff chances would very much be alive. I thought it was all done for them, but if the Rams win the game, their playoff chances are definitely going up. This game is very important for the Rams. They lose, their playoff chances drop to here. They win, their playoff chances jump up here. So, very important game for them, but also for Seattle too, because somebody has to win the NFC West. And I just feel like, based on how some of the other teams are playing, there's still more that we've got to look at for the rest of the season. But I almost feel like if this division stays pretty close, it's only going to be the one who wins the division that's going to the playoffs. None of the other teams could be a wild card, but we're only halfway through the season. There's no telling what surprises we could be in for. Kind of like San Francisco in the 2021 season. They started off with a losing record, but then later in the season, they managed to somehow end it at 10-7, and they barely make it into the playoffs. They were like the number 6 seed, but then they knock off Dallas in the wild card. They knock off Green Bay, who was the number 1 seed that season, and who led a lot of the power rankings to win the Super Bowl. in the divisional round. And then they almost beat Los Angeles in the conference championship, which Los Angeles went on to win the Super Bowl that year. But there's so many possibilities of what could happen in that division, so it'll definitely be interesting to watch. And Sunday's game will not tell us a lot about how the AFC West will end off this season, but it will definitely provide another piece to the puzzle. So moving on to the Sunday night game, we have Indianapolis Colts and Minnesota Vikings. This game I'm really looking forward to. Minnesota is a decent favorite. Point spread for them is -5, but this game could actually go either way. The end result will tell us one of two things. If Indianapolis wins, it means that their playoff chances are still alive, and while I mentioned that Indianapolis needed the game last week against Houston a little bit more than Houston did, if Houston won, they would pretty much have a commanding lead in the AFC South, which they kind of do at this point. And if Indianapolis loses, the chances for them to lose a division go way down. Chances for Houston to win AFC South go way up. If Indianapolis wins the game, it won't so much help them as in, oh man, we really got a chance to win the AFC South. But it will definitely help their chances to be a wild card in the playoffs, which they do have that chance. Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco are playing pretty good for them right now. And as far as it goes with Minnesota, if they win the game, it will show that their season's not over, that their season is still very much alive. I know they've had a couple of disappointing losses the last couple of weeks after starting off the season on fire at 5-0. And if they lose the game, they'll pretty much say that, okay, they started out great, but they're starting to slip. They could very easily be a wild card in the playoffs, but they're definitely not winning NFC North. So this game will definitely tell us a lot on Sunday. I think Minnesota will put on a great game with Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson. I think that they'll be able to snap their losing streak on Sunday night. So I'm going with Minnesota on this one. And then our final game of the week, Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Kansas City Chiefs. So Kansas City is a pretty good favorite for this game. Point spread for them is -8.5. As I mentioned in previous videos, I would not bet point spread on Kansas City. They were able to cover the spread when they played New Orleans and when they played San Francisco. However, even though Las Vegas has been seen as one of the worst teams this season, they still kept it a little bit closer. It was still a one-score game against Kansas City. I believe, Kansas City beat them 27-20. So they won the game, but they didn't cover the spread. That's why I always say just bet straight up money line on Kansas City. Could this be the same case? I don't think so. I actually think Kansas City has a slightly better chance of covering the spread this week than they did last week, but I'm still not betting point spread on them, just because they have not been known to always blow up the scoreboard and cover the spread. In fact, this season, people are arguing that their offense is not as good as they expected, and maybe not as good as it has been compared to previous seasons. But guess what? Their defense has gotten a whole lot better. Their offense is still doing great, don't get me wrong. If their offense can't blow up the scoreboard, the defense will stop the other team from scoring. One way or another, they're going to win the game. And I know it's got those pretty low favorite odds for Kansas City. Kansas City has moneyline odds of -450. So for this game, I would be more than comfortable betting a high number of chips towards Kansas City, just because you got to bet more to win more with those favorite odds. But unfortunately for Tampa, both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are still out. While Godwin will probably be out the rest of the season, Mike Evans could come back. We just don't know how long. And it also looks like Isaiah Pacheco will be returning for Kansas City. Plus, they've also got DeAndre Hopkins. Kansas City has got more than what it needs to win. This game, I feel they will easily beat Tampa, but I'm still only betting money line on them. One way or another, hands down, I'm going with Kansas City on this one. I feel like they will keep up their perfect streak for the season. And I almost feel like at this point, just with how good they are, just with how much they stand against the other top teams in the NFL. There are some good teams, but you compare them to Kansas City right now, they can't hold a candle. And Kansas City could very well have a perfect season and then have a three-peat. Come on, like, that's very possible with Taylor Swift, right? Kansas City can't lose. They're going to win. Pure and simple. So those are my picks and predictions for NFL Week 9. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. And also, if you don't already, follow me on Instagram at IHateEverything200. After the Monday night game, I'm planning on doing a live video where I kind of discuss what I think about the games of the week. Kind of compare it to who I was right about, who I was wrong about, and what that can mean going forward in the season, especially who has worse chances, who has better chances of making the playoffs. It's going to be lots of fun. I hope to see you there, and I also left a link to my Instagram in the description. I hope to see you here again for next week's NFL Picks and Predictions video. My name is Napoleon, and I'm in the closet. I hope you had a great time watching this video. Make sure to drop a like on it, and check out some of the other videos we've got on this channel. And I hope to see you in the near future.